Life Check Yourself with Julie Krawczyk and Hue Shu. Dating in 2025 Decoded. The surprising truths about how to find love in today's world. Hey, I'm super excited for this episode, but have I ever not been? Welcome to Life Check Yourself. Today, I have Julie Krawczyk and Hue Shu, and they are fellow, now we can say, traditionally published authors.
Woo.
And I did not write a dating book, but they did. And it's awesome. And it's called How to Be Dateable. So let me tell you a little bit about them. They've been on the podcast before. They have a super famous podcast, but they were active daters and they turned dating insiders. And they are the go-to voices for modern dating, like relationships and connection in the digital world. Their new book, How to Be Dateable, The Essential Guide to Finding Your Person and Falling in Love. They're the co-hosts of the hit podcast Dateable. I didn't know this. You guys have been named one of the top podcasts about modern dating.
Mm-hmm.
That's freaking amazing.
Not to toot our own horn. Yeah.
I mean, after 10 years.
Toot that horn. They're also the hosts and executive producers of a dating experiment called Exit Interview. Love that. I just learned that Julie was a human-centered design expert and that Hue shares her experience as a dating coach. And we're going to talk about this book, and I'm super, super excited. So one of the things that you and we just so you guys can have insider information, we recorded a podcast together. So we're talking for like hours already.
Yep.
But one of the things that when we were talking about on your show, I was like really wanted to dive into because I think people can really relate and will feel validated about this modern dating crisis that we're in. And I'm curious, like what did you guys find out? I know you did a lot of research and also you're out on the front lines. Like what's going on out there?
Well, we've been doing this podcast for almost 10 years and we've talked to a lot of daters. And in the decade that we've been kind of like, passively doing this research, we observed there were two cohorts of daters. One cohort of daters, which is the majority of daters today, are just feeling like, oh, this is harder than ever. It's frustrating. It's depleting my energy. Is this even worth it at all? And then they do the whole install, uninstall the apps over and over.
Right.
Again. Like maybe now
cycle.
There's new inventory. And then there's this small cohort of people who really rose above modern dating, who not necessarily got, into long-term relationships or got married, which many of them did, but that wasn't the barometer of success. It was just a cohort of people who really enjoy dating, who found that they were growing and that they were expanding themselves through dating. And they never talked about dating in a negative sense. It wasn't frustrating. It wasn't depleting. In fact, it was energizing. So we're like, okay, we're headed down. Most of the people are headed down this road of what we're calling the love crisis. They're feeling like this is even worth it at all. But then there are people who are finding hope, Julie and I included, who've never thought dating, not never, but who really felt that dating was a positive journey for us to grow. How can we level people up to that? And that's really the inspiration for writing our book, but also it's kind of a moment for us right now to instill this hope in daters.
Yeah. Yeah. So Julie, when you think of the crisis that is like external, because there's just like, I think there's like the buffet society, there's gender role misunderstandings and confusion. Like what are some of the elements that are out there that are causing the difficulty? Because I want to validate for people, like we're not here to be like, dating is, like, why can't you date? What's wrong with you? Why aren't you in that cohort of happy people or whatever?
Well, I think first and foremost, like our book is called How to Be Dateable, but we actually think at the foundation, everyone is dateable already.
Yes.
But it is modern dating and the way it's structured that's getting in our way. And I think it's been building for years. I mean, I even think about like the bad dating books I read, like The Rules and Why Men Love Bitches. And just dating has always been this like very performative way that you're supposed to act a certain way, do things a certain way. We were just talking with you on our podcast about like, you know, you think you're supposed to go to these places that you hate going to, or you have someone write a profile for you to sound appealing to people, but it's not accurate in the slightest. So when we think about that versus other parts of life that are just a lot more natural to connect with, we feel like we're held to these like standards and how we're supposed to do it and the shoulds again, instead of being authentic and like actually looking at like what would make me happy, what would be a way that I could do this in a way that gives me energy instead of drains it. So a lot of our book actually is unraveling, and instead of giving you like a laundry list of things that you need to start doing, we're actually telling you to like peel it back a bit and start looking at things differently. And how am I showing up, and how am I doing this in a way that serves me with my needs at the forefront, instead of just doing it the way we think we're supposed to do it.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that is making it so hard right now too is this like inability to be satisfied.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like he was great, but like he doesn't have this. And what if, and you know, there's like how many billion people that are on apps or whatever. You're like, oh, but maybe I could find this person, or dating someone and it's not perfect and being like, they're disposable, you know? Mm-hmm. So do you think that that when you're really dating in this place of like, okay, I'm dateable, and you're following these processes that you all are talking about, like, how do we cultivate that discerning without being picky?
Well, first, there's some social commentary that needs to be said right now about with social media culture, we tend to focus more on convincing other people of how we live our lives is the right way or the best way. So you have these, for example, you have these like fitness experts. You got to intermittent fast because that's how you lose weight and that's how you gain cognition, and it worked for me, you know. And then you have these a lot of dating experts on TikTok being like, you got to go on that walk and talk coffee date for your first date. You got to call by the third date. Like, we're all so focused on trying to get other people to validate what we're doing that we're not focused on, is this working for me? So, you know, one of the things that came out of our conversation, Marnie, is we got to go and iterate on what works for us.
Right.
And stop thinking about how it's working for other people or how society would have done it a different way. We have this privilege of finding a way that works only for us, and hold on to that. You don't need to convince anybody else of how you're living your life is the best way.
I was just going to say like, too, like, that's what causes that overwhelm. Cause I know that even for me, when I got off of TikTok a while ago, but when I was fully in it to try and be relatable to my kids, I was like, this is so overwhelming because there's so many people telling you so many different things.
Yes.
And we get in this belief that there is the one way. So you're trying to like you said, you're trying to aggregate like, well, if 10 experts say walk and talk, then that must be the right thing. But like, you know, I feel so awkward because I feel uncomfortable walking because hurt my foot, whatever it is.
Right.
I think to your point though, Marty, about like this abundance of options and just the world that we're in, it's a very interesting paradox that we see of like people saying like there's too many people out there, but then not enough good people out there.
Oh my gosh.
And it's like, I think the apps, and I'm a huge proponent of the apps. I met my fiance on the apps. Like, I believe in them, and I know there's a lot of hate on them, but I think one of the challenges with the apps is it always gives you this ability or feeling like you can trade up And there are actually studies on apps that because you're seeing all these smiling faces, it makes it feel like these people like you. And that isn't actually true. Like if you went to a bar, for instance, maybe people wouldn't look your way. But on the apps, they have to because the way they're designed, they're just set up that way. And we're also like filtering on very superficial qualities of, height and location and occupation. Not saying that stuff doesn't matter fully, but like we don't see if someone is a kind person. We don't know if they're trustworthy or they'll be committed to a relationship because that stuff isn't measurable. So the way that this is set up, I think bleeds in even if you're meeting people in person in other ways too, that we're always thinking in these like tangible qualities. And we actually call it a settling paradox, that people are so afraid to settle. They want everything on their list, especially if you've been single for a while. You're like, I can't settle now, like I need the full package. But then we're seeing people settle for just bad dating behavior or unfulfilling situationships because maybe there's chemistry or this person is good on paper.
Yes, I think that's such a good point. Like you say you don't want to settle, but you are settling for behavior. But also what's interesting too is, and I wonder what you guys think about this, I think then people settle for saying, I don't want a relationship. For some people, that is totally fine. And I'm all for it. Like I have no judgment, but I think people can hide behind
definitely
that. And then I call it the backup life, but like, it's so easy and you have to call bullshit on yourself. What do you guys, how do you do that?
Yeah. I mean, that's really what's contributing to the love crisis too, is because people feel like they need to have agency over their choices. Now they're choosing to be single. They're choosing to tap out from dating, thinking that's the decision that they should feel empowered to make. Yet at the same time, we hear over and over again, people want connection. People want love. People want relationships. We are relational animals as humans, right? We are brought into this earth to relate to each other. So for us to intentionally tap out of that means we're giving up on our humanity. And is that something we really want? So this is a question we really want to challenge our readers with in the book, is like, if you are truly wanting to connect, what is it? What's your dating why? We want people to get crystal clear on why they're dating in the first place. And it can't be just, I don't want to be the last one to be single in my friend group. I don't want to be lonely. I don't want to die alone. Those aren't the real reasons.
Yeah, you always have to find that deeper thing. One of the things I always ask people is, so let's just imagine the old tombstone engraving question, right? And do you want it to say, she got to be right, or she was right? Like she was right. Yeah, men suck, apps suck, you don't need no stinking man. Like, and I think we get so attached, our ego gets so attached to being right. And it's so easy to consensus build, like you can Google whatever you want to believe, like you can find it. So how do you, and I know we don't want to talk about the dating archetypes in a minute, but like, how do you invite someone to get the courage to put themselves out there again, when they're like suffering from what I call terminal uniqueness, which is like, you all don't know how bad it is because you all have your person. And so, like, how do we suggest that they get that courage? What's the plan in the book?
Yeah. I mean, I think first and foremost, it's recognizing that this is natural, the way dating is set up. Like the first part of our book is all these traps of modern dating that are keeping us stuck. And it's because the system is set up for failure and it's the way it's designed. And a lot of times, I think a big piece of it too is like, there's a lot of shame that comes with dating. And that's why people say like, oh, I'm okay being single. I don't need anyone. And it's coming from that deeper piece. And we call it actually the validation validation trap when dating becomes harder because you're seeking validation in this worthiness wound opposed to just finding the right partner. So I think first step is to like recognize the way that the dating culture is actually just messing with us. And then, you know, being able to say like, okay, like, yeah, dating is personal. It is hard, but actually 99% of people aren't going to be matches. And it's not always so personal. Like I'm someone that took dating so personally, and that is a bad place. That is a bad place for your mental health. You're not actually like, I mean, it's a stranger. Like you don't know what's going on in their life. Like it might have nothing to do with you at all. So I think that's first and foremost, is to like stop letting this stuff trap you as much as you can. I know easier said than done if you've been burnt out for a while and you're like, okay, it's so easy for other people. But I think some of it is like looking inward too. And like we have a whole framework of first of letting go. And I think that's so important to start off this whole thing, because a lot of times we're just holding so much. And if we are able to release some of that, we can see dating more as what it is, not always a reflection of ourselves.
Yeah. And what's funny is I see people's profile, or even like when you're getting people writing in or leaving you comments from your show, most people will tell you what they don't want.
Right. Right.
Because they're like, I've been burned before. And so then the holding, the energy that they're holding on to, even, and so when you hear someone say, well, like, I'm over it, or I'm over him, or, you know, like whatever, how can they tell if they're through the release? Like if they're not in that, like, okay, all I want is the opposite vibe.
I think when people go the opposite extreme, you know, it's
oh my gosh, yes,
gets out of a toxic relationship, and the next guy that seems stable, they're like, yes, you're stable, you're normal. And so when you don't lead with your heart, you're just leading with fear. That's when you know you've overcorrected. But one thing, hey, can you shut up? Sorry, my dog. But I think one thing I've really learned from a friend of mine is she chose to get married, and I asked her what was her reason to get married. And she said, I want to experience the most amount of love. It's not about the marriage. I just want to see how much this can open up for me. And I think if we were to look at dating in the same way, is every experience, every person you encounter could expand your capacity, not only for love, but also for rejection, for fear, for disappointment. You're expanding your capacity in both directions. Then you're able to be more resilient in life. So why wouldn't we want to take on that adventure of like constantly expanding our upper limits?
Julie?
We actually have this exercise in our book that takes what is the thing that bothers you the most about dating and turns it into a core need of yours.
Ooh,
and I think
example,
you hate that people ghost, or that is the worst thing for you. Then you need someone reliable. You need someone communicative. Or let's say, like, I'll give my example. Like I was in a on again, off again relationship spanned for years. And I think a big piece of it was the highs and the lows. I realized that that was a lot for me, and that wasn't actually fulfilling. And then I would also in dating get a lot of anxiety waiting for that next text message or the next plan to happen. And when I looked at all these experiences, I saw that consistency was actually fundamental to me. And it really changed the way that I dated the last time around before I met my fiance. And I put consistency at the forefront. So like we talked about, first is letting go, and then it's getting clear of like, what is it I actually want? Yue talked about the dating why. We call it our dating North Star. We combine the dating why with your core needs. And that's how you date with yourself at the forefront. And there's a whole exercise to walk you through it. I know this is all up your alley.
It's so good. So good. Get this book.
But it's like I don't know, for me, when I was dating, if someone couldn't meet that basic need and like that North Star of like having someone that would show up consistently, then I don't care how great they are on paper.
About the rest.
And it put me into a place of empowerment too.
Yes.
I think the experience I had before I met my partner, I got rejected more than ever before. And the old me would have crumbled and gone to dating is the worst. People are the worst. Like, why can't this work for me? This poor me mentality. But because I had this shift, I was actually like, okay, this person wasn't it. I know someone that prioritizes me is core to me. They weren't able to do that. I'm going to let them go and look for that next person.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was mindset work and just this belief that like, it's going to happen. And I really believe that too. It's like, if you are if you want dating to happen, like if you're listening to podcasts like this or our podcast or getting these books, like, you want to find your person. Right. And that's a good thing. Like, we're meant to do life with other people. Like, there's no shame in that. But if you truly want it, it will happen as long as you get out of your own way.
Yeah. And I think this thing about the core needs is so true. I remember when I was dating and there was this guy and he was super cute and he was like successful and all those things. But he never followed through, like he never followed through. Right. And so he called me and he was like, hey, do you want to go out or whatever? And I was like, listen, what's really important to me right now is words and actions matching.
Yeah.
And like, I appreciate it, but like, you're super inconsistent and I just know already we're not a match. And then he was like, oh, sorry. Wow. Well, honestly, I really want to go out with you now, right? Because I was like making myself like a powerful person, right? Yeah. And people are like afraid to say that kind of stuff. And it's like that confidence, like that you're talking about, when you just know that, whether you say it or you don't say it, but you just know it, you're like, you just ruled yourself out, bro. Thanks.
I had a similar experience and my person was like, you're right. I don't have the capacity. And that's okay.
Yeah.
I think like that's also okay. Yeah. And like, then it freed me up to meet my now person, and I'm grateful for that. But I think the old me would have been like, well, there was a connection at the beginning. I'm going to just keep going with this and I don't want to let it go. And I've built this vision of this person up and, it's too good to be true. I'm going to keep going with it.
Escalation in business, they call it like escalation of commitment.
Right?
Yeah. And you're like, I've already invested this much money in this business. Like, I can't quit now. And you're like, but the model isn't working or there's no proof of concept. You're like, no, but it's my idea.
But I also want to highlight in both of your examples, though, you led with your needs first, not a demand, or a criticism. And I think a lot of times we get this dating advice, like set your boundary by telling them what they did wrong. You could have easily said, well, you're being inconsistent, or you should have texted me back. But what you said was, I'm looking for someone to do X, Y, and Z. And you haven't done that. You're leading with you at the forefront, like Julie was saying, which then it doesn't become about them. It's about, this is what I'm looking for. Do you want to come along for the ride or not? And if not, cool.
Yeah. Right. Because I'm not in dating scarcity.
Right. I think that's a big piece of it, though, is to get out of that mentality. And a lot of us goes back to that paradox I mentioned. Like, why are we in this world where there's too many options, there's too many apps, there's too many places to go, yet no one good out there? But it's what you're seeing also.
Yes, 100%. Okay, so let's talk about, I'm curious about the dating archetypes.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if there are any, and I know this is what you're talking about in the book, is about like, dating to your strengths and like really knowing who you are as a dater. So can we talk about the archetypes?
One of our favorite topics.
Yeah.
Archetypes are basically a way for us to organize 5 different categories of, in each category, you have ways of thinking and attitudes towards dating, and also kind of like what it could be holding you back. What are some of the obstacles? So there are no good or bad archetypes. It's just more of an observation. And you have your superpowers, and then you have things to watch out for. So we came up with 5 based on the daters that we've talked to in the last 10 years. And we'll just quickly name them because I think for listeners, you might gravitate towards a name already or resonate with a name. So we have the Maverick, the Achiever, Thinker, Energizer, and Dreamer. I'm the Maverick. This is someone who is very independent, very strong in who they are. I have a great sense of self and I really honor space with my partners. But what may be holding me back is that I tend to run. I tend to run at the first sight of a conflict, at the first sight of anything threatening my independence. I become preemptive in my actions. I do it before someone else does because I'm just protecting myself from getting hurt. So that's a Maverick.
What are you, Julie?
So people could have a couple leading ones
I was gonna
too.
Say, I think I have a little one.
Yeah. And there's a lot of times the way we design this too is that you have everything. Just some are more prominent than others. And again, this is like, the idea is that you get to know yourself and other people you're dating because people might operate differently too, depending on what their archetypes are. So the two leading ones for me are the Achiever and the Dreamer. So the Achiever is the one that knows what they want. They go after it. Probably served you really well in your work, right? Education, like you are driven, motivated, all the things. The downside is when you're so focused on milestones and the future, it's really hard to stay present. And you also might stay in relationships like we were talking about earlier, like the sunk cost fallacy of like, I've invested so much, I don't want to turn away. And that could be a situationship that's not serving you, or it could just be a relationship that's not right. And you don't want to let it go because you don't want to start over. The other side of me was the Dreamer. And the Dreamer is the person that has so much love to give. They are, they are warm. They have like that whimsical nature. They are so caring to the people they love. The problem with the Dreamer is sometimes you funnel that energy into people that aren't always deserving of it. You get ahead of yourself. You are living in a fantasy and not reality. For most of my dating experience, my biggest downfall was staying with the wrong people in the sense of I was the queen of situationships, that I would think that something was a lot more serious than it was because I was in this Dreamer mode, that I would have a couple first great dates, and then they would become increasingly commitment phobic or just outright say they don't want a relationship. But I was holding on to this idea and I couldn't let it go because then my Achiever came in.
You're like, what can I do? I will convince him.
Yes. I was like, I will measure my own. It took me years to realize this, but I measured my own worth through this person wanting to be in a relationship. So I thought if I could change their mind, then that would show something about me.
Girl, I was like, that was my varsity sport.
So do you think you're those two, or because we also have Achiever, we also have Energizer and Thinker too.
Was the Thinker someone who overanalyzes every single thing?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm like all of those to some extent, but I do know that my self-worth was so low that, and I was very much like an achiever. So, I think that was the early version of me. But remember when I was telling you on your show about the guy who called me out for being emotionally unavailable?
Yeah.
I think after my divorce and I started working on myself and I got confident, and then I really tapped into my over masculine energy, and I was literally
probably more Maverick. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't need no stinking man. I was like, ew, I don't want to sleep over. I don't want to go to the farmer's market with you. I just want to freaking have my coffee and go to yoga.
Well, that's a good point because we can change over time too. I think I was more of a Dreamer, and then I kind of rectified some of that. And then, the Achiever still creeps in even when I was in a serious, even in a serious relationship, I was always thinking of what's next? What's that next stage? So I think it's something that the quiz can unveil what could be going on. And we've also seen people, like we had a friend, we did some, actually your listeners can take it now. It is live for everyone.
What's the quiz URL?
It's howtobedateable.com is the link, and the quiz is there. So obviously it's even better when you read the book, but you can even do it without reading the book. And we had some people test the quiz just to make sure, like everything made sense and all that. We had a friend of ours that took it, and she came out the thinker. And she was very surprised by it. And we were like, we are not surprised at all. Like, look at our text thread. You are overanalyzing everything. And
you can't see it, right?
Yeah.
So this quiz is like a mirror.
Yeah. And some people might get theirs. We've seen people that are like, yep, I knew I was this. And then others, there might be some surprises. And we encourage you to dig deeper into why maybe that was coming through for you.
Well, we talked a lot about taking responsibility, right? So this just like and you guys were talking about releasing, right? So like if you don't look at this, then you're just hiding if you're like blaming like the culture.
Yeah. And the thing is, we're not telling anyone to change. Like, I think all of these, there's attributes that are huge strengths. Like, we didn't touch on the energizer, but the energizer is, that person that's full of like energy. They're extroverted. They're always going out. They're a great date because they're someone that's fun and inviting and, all the things. The downside of the energizer is sometimes you're all that go, go, go. It makes it hard to slow down, reflect. And then also sometimes if you're on all these dates, it's hard to go deep with people if everything's surface, or maybe your life is just so jam packed that you can't even schedule a date for 3 weeks and then the momentum dies. So, but the thing is with an energizer, we would never say like, stop doing that. Like being who you are, like lean into the benefits of the energizer in the sense that like you bring so many good qualities. Like people love being around you, but maybe it's going on less dates, like less is more mentality for you. Where like the thinker, we might say dive in because sometimes your overthinking analysis paralysis doesn't always make you take that leap.
And do you think that this shows up? So you're engaged and you're married?
No, in a relationship.
In a relationship. Okay. Do you think that these things also show up once you land your person?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Oh, but I think a good part, my partner is a thinker through and through. And I'm an achiever, or have that tendency. And I think that was actually like kind of like a part that was a little challenging for the two of us, because I'm like, go, I want to move. I want to get to that next step. And he's like, I need to think about all the things, right? And then move. So we had a little bit of a pace discrepancy through our relationship of moving in and getting engaged, all that. But I think ultimately it actually worked really well for us because it allowed the middle ground, right? Like instead of like, you need one person that is kind of moving it along, and then one person that's like, let's make sure our relationship is fully developed before we get to that next stage.
What about you, Yue?
Yeah, I actually just retook the quiz last night. My Maverick score did go down, and my Achiever score, which was my other dominant one, went down substantially.
Interesting.
I think it's because I am with someone with grown kids. And I think when we talk about milestones, they're a little bit different. And I don't feel the pressure to move forward or progress because we talk about what's next constantly. And that anxiety part of me about achieving something next is completely, gone. I think it's completely gone. I will say in this relationship, it's completely gone. But the Maverick side of me has stayed because he does have other responsibilities. So I feel like I have to be even more responsible for myself. And that how this shows up in our relationship is super interesting because he's a thinker. So he actually overthinks my independent actions. Like when
he makes up stories about it.
Yes. When I need space, he's like, oh, she's breaking up with me. This is it. Like, this is the end. I'm like, no, I actually just need some space. Or I go on a trip on my own. And he's like, does this mean she's running away from me? I need to think about this a little bit more. So we have had those conversations. Like, I think I've triggered more of his thinker in this relationship. it's
but the thing is, by knowing, you can actually talk about it. I think that's the key.
And I think that is, and so also this just points to, because I like to debunk the myth that once you find this person and they're going to be the right person, then you're never going to have any challenges. And
oh
then,
my God.
Right. And then
I wish that was the case. And I
right. And then we talk about like not being satisfied, and there's so many, people, but there's nobody good. And so I think the other piece of this is once you know what your archetype is, you can understand that to some extent, whoever you're with is going to be a version of some of these things. And, I think it was Alison Armstrong back in the day who said, men aren't just hairy women, right? Like they're different from us. And they are different and they're humans. And, I just think this is such an important thing that you're bringing up with these archetypes, because you can, like it's so fun, the beginning part, getting to compatibility. Like once you're like, oh, this is so great. And it's really easy to forget that, this person that you found has all these differences than you. And then if you don't explore these things and understand that this is who the person is, then you're pissed that he's an overthinker.
Yes. Instead of seeing the benefits of it.
Exactly. Right. You're like, wait, no, like you think too much. You're like, wait, but I was always that way and we were a balance. And so I think this quiz, whether you're single or not, take the quiz. Yeah. Okay. So before we go, this is the one thing that I really wanted to make sure we talked about, was this idea that, dating is not a numbers game, because I feel like so often the mantra is you only need to find just one, just keep at it, blah, blah, blah. So what do you say to that?
I actually think it's okay to think like you just need to find one, because I think that actually reduces the pressure, or a few if you're poly, whatever you're doing. But, I think with like the numbers game where we see people fall into this trap is like you're just lining up date after date after date. And people can feel like when they're in a lineup, and that's kind of back to the energizer mentality. It's like hard to go deep with someone. I did this. I was an energizer at one part of my life. I would go on like dates back to back. Like I
did that too. I thought I was the only one.
Oh my God. A lot of us. Yeah.
Thursdays, right. 11:30, 1:30, 3:30. Let's just do it.
I know. And then you show up and you are so drained and all of that. I personally, from my own experience and people we've talked to too, when I've met actual partners, it's when I was going on less dates. And, the time around now, like I wasn't dating anyone else at the same time as my partner. And if it didn't work out with him, you can always go back to the apps. Like it's not like that. But also, I think a big piece of it too is like there's a time in your life that dating like a numbers game makes sense, when you just want to go on a lot of dates and learn about different people, and maybe you're fresh out of a divorce or new to dating. But then at the time of like actually meeting your person, we see time and time again that the less is more when you're actually going on the right dates, not just any date. That's what actually ends up helping you.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Were you guys the ones, I'm having a 2019 flashback. Were you guys the one that was we were talking about running, that dating is like running?
Oh my God.
Maybe not.
I don't even remember like what we said last week. So
I just had this conversation about, I remember this conversation about like a lot of people take on dating. Like we're recording this at the beginning of the year and people are like, all right, I got this, January, let's go, and it's like, you wouldn't be like, oh, it's January, whatever, I'm going to run a marathon like in 2 weeks.
Right.
You wouldn't like be like, bam, bam, bam. You would be hurt. You would get sore. You would hate it. You would quit. Right. And so this like whole thing of like, it's like, get in as many dates as you can before the end of Q1. And then you're going to meet your person by like summer, doesn't seem to work. So do you make any recommendations about like what is appropriate to, like you were talking anyway in our show that we just did before about like, what are some guidelines or guardrails around what is enough?
Well, here's the thing, right? With the numbers game, if you truly believe that dating's a numbers game, at least understand that some of the numbers you're not able to see. And the reason why I say this is because when you're authentically who you're attracting people at the same time you're repelling people.
Amen.
Right?
Yes.
So the people that you've repelled, the people who are not swiping on you, the people who are not asking you out are not right for you. Those are numbers. There's plenty of those too. We're just not seeing them. So if you have to look at dating as a numbers game, just know that you are attracting people and repelling people at the same time. That's when you're most authentically you. The guideline is, one, you got to be in some environment where you're meeting people. You can't be at home. Like there's no numbers in general when you're at home.
Right. You can't be like one person a year. I
went on a date.
Like, oh, it's not about the number, but it is kind of, if you're meeting.
There is a little bit of number.
There's a little bit of that. But how can you put yourself in an environment where, Marnie, you talk about this, where you shine, right? Where you're in your own element. You can be authentic and you can show availability. And it's not like I'm desperate to meet someone, but the availability to connect. And we hear this all the time from like body language experts. They're like, take out your headphones.
Yeah.
Put your phone away when you're walking.
Amen.
You never know who you're going to run into. Same thing with dating apps. It's like people think, oh, I could only be on the dating apps or be out there meeting people IRL. Be on both. Do everything you can to increase your chances of making connections. But also no, you're not in a pageant. It's not a popularity contest. You're not trying to get everybody into your orbit. You're just trying to get the right people in your universe so that you can connect with them.
We call it like a dating consumption strategy of figuring out what gives you energy. And again, it doesn't have to be either or, like Yue was saying. Like when I was dating the last time around, I went on dating apps literally on Sunday nights. That was it. And that was the most popular time. So you would likely have more conversations. And I didn't want to be just like beholden to dating apps. I was living my life the other times. I was kind of like, I don't think people have to be necessarily this rigid, but I would be like Sunday nights on dating apps. Wednesday would be my night to meet people, whether it was a date.
That's great. I like structure.
Yeah. Or like going out with friends to like, or just going out, whatever it was. Video call, whatever. And then Friday and Saturday, or Friday especially, I was very intentional to keep that as like a friend's night because I wanted to make sure that I like filled my cup and that I had that connection no matter what. Because I think we hear of people, you probably do too. It's like, I went on all these dates this weekend. They were all a dud. And then you just feel drained. So I think this like slow and steady sometimes wins the race, like as cliche as that is. And it's like all about like, how are you showing up? Another thing that like just an anecdote quickly was like, I realized for a long time, I would go to all these dates and I would never save anyone's number in my phone because I was thinking like, oh, another date. I'm likely never going to see them again. I have another date tomorrow.
Right.
That is a terrible way to show up for a date. Would you ever go and meet a friend and be like, I'm never going to see this person again? Like at that point, you might as well not even go. So when I made the simple switch of putting someone's ideally even full name, but at least first name in, I was like, oh, I'm going to meet Kevin tonight. I'm excited to meet Kevin. Showing up that way versus like, I'm probably never going to see this person again. It's a huge shift.
Yeah. And this is the last thing that I want to say about that, and then we'll wrap it up. But like, because you were talking about the shame piece earlier. I feel like in this environment right now, it's almost like people are like ashamed of like actually saying like, I'm dating, I'm looking for a partner. Like I actually make time for dates. I give a shit. Like it's cool to not give a shit about dating. And I just think like, if you're not even putting someone's phone number in your phone or calling them by their first name, then you're not taking yourself seriously. So how can anyone else actually want to get to know you? Because we want it to be fun, right? But like, it's not a game. And so when we treat it that way, and we're acting like we don't care because we don't want to get hurt or we don't think it's cool, like what's the point? Like get over that.
I'm really glad you said that, because I think that's another piece that ties it to the very start of this convo of like what's different today is like dating has become so public. Like we talk about it with our friends. We have all these terms for bad dating behavior that are so normalized. I think, we hear of people like consulting their group text versus talking to the person they're dating, or they have nicknames for all the people they're dating.
Yes.
And it's like at that point, it's becoming entertainment. It's not becoming a connection to the other person.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so funny. That was like when I was dating, that was my first thing. I was like, okay, I'm going to stop calling them by these like labels that were like, putting them in a box, except side hole penis. He will forever be side hole penis.
Oh my God, I want to hear more of that story.
Wait, we can't end on that.
If you're listening, you know who you are. No.
The image in my head right now, I know.
If you're driving, keep your eyes on the road.
People just swarmed off after that.
I don't penis. No, they're like, oh shit, I thought it was just me. Okay.
I have a side hole penis too. Yeah.
Where else would it be?
You're like, well, we can talk about that later. Anyway, so the book is in the show notes, but you must order it immediately. I look at a lot of dating books and I roll my eyes at half of them because they're just saying the same shit in a different way. But I really love what you guys are doing because it's so in alignment with this like very nuanced place of like authenticity and strategy. And personal responsibility, and that there's no like hack and like do this one thing, and and I just think it's so practical and also inspiring and powerful, and your personality just really like you guys, your collective brand, love, humor, fun just shines through. What's the URL again where we get the book?
It's howtobedateable.com.
I love that. Okay. Any lasting pieces of advice?
Getting your seal of approval, Marnie, I think is
that made my day.
Like Julie's been reading your stuff forever, and you are kind of like the pioneer in authentic dating advice. And so for you to say that about our book, I think it brings tears to our eyes.
It really does.
Oh, well, it's so true. And that's one of the reasons why I got off TikTok. I literally it made me just wanted to punch people all day long. Because I was like, you're 24 and you're giving dating advice. So like,
there's a lot of bad stuff out there. And I remember actually that drew me to you in the first place. Because like Why Men Love Bitches is still the #1 book of dating right now.
I know.
So we need to knock it out. We're in a new era of dating right now.
Yes, we are in a new era. And I think like the last time we talked, it was 2019. We had COVID, we had the pandemic, we had, we've had a lot of stuff. And so I think it's time. I've been talking a lot about reinvention, and I think like everyone can give themselves the gift of saying like, yes, I know it's hard. My mantra for everyone listening is, so what? Now what? It's a new era. Go get this book and figure out how to be dateable, because what you guys said is like everyone is dateable. There is someone out there. And I always tell women all the time, for as hard as it is, there's a guy out there who's like, I just want to meet somebody who's normal and has their shit together.
Totally.
So read this book and make yourself a goddamn neon sign. Okay, Julie, what's your last piece of advice?
I think the one that's been sticking with me is trust in your timing. Especially for the achievers out there. But I think, like sometimes we're always like, we should be further along, or we shouldn't be here, or we should have this by now. And I look at my life too, and I'm like, I needed those experiences. I needed those situationships that didn't work out to get me to where I am today. And like in theory, of course, I wish I could have like 10 extra years with my partner, go back in time, but we also wouldn't have met each other if it wasn't for the timing now. So I think, yes, it's easy to go to a place of like what I don't have, but like, how do we look at like, why is this actually serving me that I am where I am at this moment?
I love that. That reminds me of one of my favorite slogans, which is everybody is somebody else's asshole. And so
I love how we went from trust in your timing to everyone is someone else's asshole.
But it's true, right?
It is.
Like,
it is.
That guy who finally stopped, searching for double D's and wanted to have a relationship, like he was probably a jerk to someone else.
Totally.
And, Yue, like in her independence, maybe she like whatever and like learned that she had to like open up and soften up and have the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We all are somebody else's asshole. And so like, so given that, trust your timing.
Yes. Wipe your ass. Wipe your ass, everyone.
If he has a side hole penis, it's still okay. Ladies, there was so much in this episode for you to chew on. Not a side hole penis, but so much learning growth. I know. I'm just going to say it over and over again. Let's play a drinking game with this episode and make it go viral. Okay.
Oh, man, I can't wait.
That is a great idea.
We want all our books to be #1 bestsellers, and side hole penis is the
That's
code
our
word.
marketing strategy.
That's our marketing strategy.
That's a hashtag right there.
Hashtag for sure. I love it. But I think that the thing is, what I really want everyone who's listening is that like, there are so many, like if you look and you read this book and you listen to this episode and you go, wow, there's like so many opportunity points for me to like shift, do something different. Like pick one. It's called Life Check Yourself. Pick one and see what opens up for you. And enjoy the damn process. Thank you, ladies, so much. We definitely need to do this before 5 years. So
yes,
for sure.
Yes.
But,
yes. Thank you, Marnie,
Let's
for
go on
having
another
us.
date.
This has been a ball.
All right, ladies, you can find me on Instagram, MarnieBatista _ MarnieBatista.com. Take quizzes, have fun, and above all, don't forget, life check yourself. We'll see you again. Bye-bye. Hey, thanks for tuning in today. Listen, if you're feeling stuck, I want you to know you're not alone, and you don't have to settle for it. I've created a free quiz to help you pinpoint what's draining your energy and exactly how you can fix it. So head over to decodeyourdestinyquiz.com and take the 60-second quiz right now. That's decodeyourdestinyquiz.com. And if you're ready to dive deeper, you can book a free no-obligation consultation at marnibatista.com/private coaching. That's Marnie, M-A-R-N-I, Batista, B-A-T-T-I-S, as in Sam, T-A.com/private coaching, all one word. Let's take the first step to creating a life you love on your terms. I'm Marnie, and I'll see you next time.